This is a plant, but not a plant like any other. It feeds on living creatures and is a trap for the same. It is a Venus flytrap, and if you look carefully you can see how it or he works. Observe. Teeth and all. Big jaws. And when it wants something to eat, it simply has to open those jaws, and inside there is something very interesting for a hungry fly. It's in miniature what's happening to the soul. The fly is attracted by the sweetness that this gives off, and our senses are attracted by the sweetness that they feel when tickled by something which flatters them. But then, once the man is drawn inside, immediately those jaws close over him, and he's sucked in and ingested by the hungry plant, which then swallows it and waits for the next victim, very much like the jaws of hell. Next please. Next please. Next please. All done by the same operation of titillating the senses so that the real optic is not thought about. I remember in Rome, the one who was teaching us to preach, he had been actually a Baptist, a Southern Baptist, and had grown up in that Bible belt where things were taken seriously. He became a Dominican and was giving us very good lectures on how to preach. And he insisted there should always be one visual aid or a story every time, because that's the bit that people carry away with them. And one day he was quoting us what he had done one time when preaching in a big church in America. He'd used his weekly allowance to buy a crystal vessel, and he took this with him into the pulpit, and before this full church he dangled it, precious as it was. This, my friends, is your immortal soul. Look how precious it is. But it is dangling. It's dangling over the abyss. And it only takes one moment of distraction of my two fingers for it to fall, for it to fall, for it to fall. And he opened them. Ah! What a waste. Yes, dear, what a waste of all eternity. And it was a point which no one would have forgotten, that we're carrying our immortal soul in our hands, and we can make a mess of all eternity with one moment of distraction. But I just want to give you another jog for your memory, the things that lead us to the other place. Now, the 7 deadly sins, so called because they work like cancer. They cause spiritual hardening of the interior life and eventually death. Now, can you remember some of them? Say one of them.
Greed.
Greed. Now, can you find one there amongst that lot? Pick one up. Good. Now, light it. Greed. Oh, pick up greed, if you say. What is greed? It's going beyond the measure. Beyond the measure in money and food and things on the outside. And even actually spiritual greed. When things are even out of proportion, when we prefer our own well-being when we should be doing something else. It's quite elusive. One can be in ecstatic prayer and forgetting that one has duties at home. It's a spiritual greed. But the usual form of greed is actually far more obvious. And a good way is just to think of the person next to us. Now then, can you think of another one? Envy. Now, have a look. I'll light it for you, no trouble. Bring it here. Envy. Now, what colour is that candle you picked up for envy? Green. Now, in Shakespeare, the great tragedy about jealousy and envy is Othello. And when it's all starting, beware, my lord, of jealousy. It is the green-eyed monster that mocks the one it feeds on. Often we mess up our own joy because we're jealous of other people's. But it's the same thing that the devil did at the beginning, because he was jealous. He didn't want other people coming into his glory, and he wants them with him in his place of perdition. Because he, in the first place, was owning his gifts as a bright angel. But once we own them, we lose them. Because we only own what we receive on loan. That is nothing at all. We have them just for the use. Any more can you think of? Sloth, that's it. Yeah. Now, sloth, have a look. Where can you find it? What colour is it?
White.
That's white. Now, the blissfulness of staying in bed or doing things which are more interesting than what has to be done. It doesn't really bode well for somebody when one starts life with that. And unfortunately, it's more common than we think, because it's more subtle. Nowadays, watching for long periods of time a screen, not just the television but internet, is a form of sloth, because homework is not being done. We're having a good time getting sucked into the screen. Sloth, it's not really doing what we should while we're here on earth. Can you think of another one? I'll do it. Anyone? Any more? Wrath. Now, that's ira in Latin. Ire. Anger. Just the other day, in this chapel, I had 3 little children. Well, one was an adolescent, and one would be about 11, and one was a child younger than you. And that had been a very dramatic case of ire, anger, wrath. The father had lost it, as we say in Ireland. He got very, very angry indeed. And he'd actually got so angry that he started to beat his wife, and beat her so hard that she actually died. That was just a few days ago. And so I had here the children of that disaster. Just think the drama that's going to do. We were a bit afraid that actually it might not finish there, that he might actually commit suicide afterwards, but he didn't. It was actually quite dramatic. The Holy Spirit got through to him, and he came out himself with this: I won't commit suicide, because if I do, I'll go under. I want to do my penance here, even in prison, so that I can actually get to see my wife again. Actually, I loved her, but I lost it. So there he is, getting his act together in prison. But anger, once it's out of control, is a very, very dangerous demon. Always be in control of your emotions, and even words can be daggers. So think twice before launching them into the air. Any other?
Pride.
Pride! Now, that's linked with another one, isn't it? The green one. Now, the original sin of your man, Satan. I. Because he owned his gifts. But it's the same thing, isn't it? We're in the same game when we want people to just adore us. Thomas More has a passage somewhere in his writings where he describes the proud man. He's the one who thinks that the whole cosmos has nothing better to do than to sing an eternal sanctus around his head. But pride is usually more subtle. And pride actually sometimes is so subtle that we can't even notice it ourselves. E.g., we take the stage in conversation. We want to talk. It's a form of pride, isn't it? We don't let people talk. And so on it goes. Be careful, because if we catch it, it escapes us. And even actually humility can be proud. We're proud of being humble. Very dangerous. Pride is so subtle, it's all a participation in the other guy's original sin. Any other?
Gluttony.
Gluttony. Now, gluttony. We were talking one day about the situation in one part of the world. It's the Western world, the States out there, where even ordinary food has sugar in it. And people eat lots and lots and don't move around because everything is automated. So they grow rotund and they can't lose weight. It's easy to put on weight, but not easy to lose it. But gluttony is not a nice thing. It means that we don't honour our body. And it's important that we look after the temple of the Holy Spirit and don't put on weight. And don't also waste what the Lord has given us. Even smoking is a subtle form of gluttony because we're burning 20-pound notes. But gluttony is a very strange thing. Often people comfort eat. They're not happy, so they take it out on food. So one wants to go to the root cause. Gluttony. Now, one more I think, is it? What's the last one?
Lust.
Lust. Now, lust. Be careful of the goggle box. It feeds lust. And so does internet, the Google box. Because one now cannot watch live television as we were able to when we were children, even in children's hour, because you've got adverts coming in between, and there's not really much going on as regards censorship. And when it comes to films, whereas in the 60s the good classical films were good and clean, but now there's always some scene, and you can't really trust even an officially good film. There'll be something there. So be careful, shield your soul. Only watch what you know 100% to be very sure, and that is the best filter. But as time goes on, be careful of your eyes in general, because they're the portholes of the soul over the world, and things come in and they stay in the mind. So what goes in stays in and wreaks havoc. Good lad. So we'll come now to the altar of our God. But remember these things, you must burn them just as we're burning light by the relics of the Holy Cross, and not want to play with the one who is responsible for that cross. In other words, the one who messed us up, the other guy. Try now, as we come to Jesus, to remember he's feeling and hurting just as a friend would when we upset him. So let's promise now quietly not to collude with the enemy and burn forever these vicious, deadly bits of the other one. Some time ago, it was actually in the early 40s, there was a young man who was a Negro in America whose name was Claude Newman. He was eventually brought up by his grandmother for some reason, but the grandmother married another man, and this man very soon began to treat her badly. And this good boy could not take it anymore. He, in his own way, wanted to defend his dear grandmother, which led eventually to his being guilty of the murder, yes, the murder, it would seem, of the man in question. He was eventually caught and put in prison, and indeed sentenced to death. He was in a prison block, and with him were some other four also condemned. And one of them was a lapsed Catholic, but had on him a medal on a string. This Negro was a bit puzzled. What's this about? Oh, take it if you want. I don't want to do it. So he took it, the thing. The other one had no interest whatsoever. So he put it round his neck. And he was sleeping in his prison bed, and he was woken at midnight by what he called the most beautiful lady he had ever seen, who said to him, "Would you like me to be your mother? If you would, ask for a Catholic priest and ask for instruction in faith." Now he was nothing at all. Couldn't even read. So, a certain Father O'Leary, the chaplain of the prison, came along and started to give him instruction, along with a few others. I think there were those around him in that prison area who were interested. At a certain point, he started to give a class on confession. And Claude blurted out, "Oh yes, I know about that. If one is going to confession, one talks not to the priest, but as though one were talking to God. And when the priest says, 'I absolve you,' there is flowing over you the blood of Christ, and one is washed completely of anything that one has done." Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to blurt anything out. Not at all. Where on earth did you pick that up? Oh, the lady told me. The lady? Eventually, the chaplain picked up there was something going on. It was another class. It was time for instruction on the Eucharist. This time, he asked, had the lady said anything to him? Now, in the meantime, he'd been talking with Claude. And Claude had said, "I was told, if the priest at any point shows any doubt about where you're learning these things, you must tell him, in 1940, you, Father, were in a trench in Holland, and you made a vow to the Blessed Virgin that if you survived, you would do something. Now, she is waiting for you to carry that out." I see. By the way, it was to build a church in honour of the Immaculate, and he did after the war in Holland. Now, when it came, therefore, to instruction on the Blessed Sacrament, he asked, "Did the lady tell you anything about this one?" "Yes. She told me this. In the Blessed Sacrament, you will only see what looks like ordinary bread. But that is really the body and blood, soul and divinity of my Son." When it came to eventually giving Holy Communion to this man, he had an angelic devotion. He was on his knees, he couldn't wait for Jesus to come. Eventually, the sentence was pronounced, or rather the date was given for the execution. 20th of June, I think it was, 1945, at 5 minutes past midnight. So he was getting ready, and it came to his last Holy Communion. The priest was there on one side of the bars, and the other was on that side. And knelt, and with great devotion, he received Jesus for the last time, knowing that he would soon be seeing him face to face without the veil. It was ticking over towards the moment for applying the electric current. And out of the blue, the sheriff of the prison, a certain Williamson, ran up and shouted, "Reprieve! Reprieve!" Oh, what does that mean? They decided to put it back a fortnight. And what was going on? They were trying to appeal to the highest authority to have it commuted to a life sentence of imprisonment. You didn't know about this. Poor Claude wept. But they thought, well, he's so glad. It's a fortnight left. But no, you don't understand. What's the matter? When you've seen her, you can't want to be one more day on earth. brainwave. I know. Now, do you remember, Claude, this nasty prisoner, Jim Hughes, how he hates you? He was a Catholic, but look how he's turned out. Why don't you use every minute you've got left and all your pain now to offer everything for his conversion? Yeah, that's a good idea. I'll do that. So that's what he did. A fortnight went by. The Attorney General did not accept the appeal, so the current was to be applied. He went to the chair. He was beaming with joy, beaming with ecstasy. He was going to see that beautiful lady again. And in a few minutes, the current had sent him into the beyond, to his Blessed Mother, fortified by the Blessed Sacrament that he adored. Now, a few weeks later, this other one, who was also on death row, Jim, was coming up. It's your turn. Now, come this way. Now, in those days, in the mid-40s, remember, faith was important in the States. And by law, in that state, there had to be a clergyman present at the execution. They tried their best, whatever the faith of the person, to do something sacred before he went into the beyond. And they'd been trying discreetly with this one. And every time that anything was mentioned, he was demonic in his hatred. Nothing. The only hope they had was actually the doctor. He whispered, well, maybe, just say, one, Our Father, the Lord's Prayer just once, and immediately an explosion of hatred, not a question. And even though by law they had to have a clergyman present, the chaplain, Father O'Leary, could not show his collar and had to be completely camouflaged amongst the others, invisible somewhere there. So there he was. He was strapped in to the electric chair. Now, they tried to get him to have some kind of prayer in the electric chair. They pray for him. Immediately, he started to blaspheme in the most demonic way in the electric chair. Suddenly, he stopped talking and screamed. He was looking in one direction. Get me a priest! A priest! So, Father O'Leary came out of the woodwork. Even without his collar, he did what he could. Everyone else had to clear the decks, and he heard his confession in the electric chair. They came back. The sheriff was thoroughly bewildered and bemused. Went up to the chaplain, whispered in his ear, "What made him change?" "No, didn't ask him." "Well, if you don't, I will. I won't sleep a night if I don't." So I went up to him in the electric chair and said in the most gentle voice, "Brother, what made you change?" Do you remember Claude, that Negro, the one I hated so much? He's standing there behind you, and behind him, with arms on each shoulder, is the Blessed Virgin Mary. And he said to me, "Jim, I offered all my pain for your conversion, and the Blessed Virgin has obtained this grace for you. But you would see at this point your place in hell. I have just seen my place in hell, and that's why I scream." Do you know the medal that the other one was wearing? Can you guess? What? Miraculous medal.
Yes.
Our Blessed Lady is big time miracle.